This is Planning Your I Do from You Had Me at I Do. For over a quarter century, You Had Me at I Do has been helping couples say, I do. We bring more than 400 weddings of real-world experience as an officiant and a DJ, and this podcast is packed with what you, as the bride and groom, need to know, what you're wondering about, and what's keeping you up at night. No judgment, no fluff, just real answers and ideas for real planning. Here's today's episode.
You could spend like 200 hours and maybe $30,000 planning the absolute perfect wedding. You've tasted the cake, you've agonized over the playlist, you've perfectly color matched the napkins, and yet the number one reason couples say their wedding felt like this stressful, exhausting blur has absolutely nothing to do with the flowers or the food. It usually comes down to a really fundamental misunderstanding of who is actually holding the clipboard.
Right. It is the universal breaking point.
Yeah.
Couples hit this wall late at night, staring at 14 open tabs and this incredibly intimidating budget spreadsheet. And they're wondering, do I really need a wedding planner, or can I just sort of tough this out to save money?
Which creates a massive paradox, right? Because on one hand, you want this beautiful, seamless day where you can actually enjoy the party you are throwing. But on the other hand, you have a very real, very finite budget. So today, we are jumping straight into helping you solve this. Our mission in this deep dive is to map out the often messy, overlapping differences between full planners, day of coordinators, venue staff, and your own DIY spreadsheets.
And this framework is just so essential. Through our work at You Had Me at I Do, we've officiated more than 400 weddings over 26 years, and the pattern is just glaringly obvious. The couples who actually laugh, who, eat their dinner, who are emotionally present, they are rarely the ones trying to manage the event logistics flow on the day itself.
Because running an event and experiencing an event are two entirely different physical states. I mean, you can't be holding a walkie-talkie while wearing your wedding outfit.
Precisely. You just can't. The couples who relaxed, they had a clear plan, and more importantly, they had a designated person executing that plan. The goal here is to equip you with the knowledge to build a support structure so you can actually be a guest at your own wedding, right, rather than, working a 12-hour administrative shift.
Yeah, nobody wants to work on their wedding day. So let's establish the actual landscape of this support structure. The wedding industry loves to throw titles around, and frankly, it seems to generate a lot of guilt. People feel inadequate if they can't afford luxury help, or they feel guilty if they are struggling to manage everything alone.
Oh, absolutely. And right off the bat, we need to dismantle that guilt. We operate on what we call the support spectrum. And there is zero moral hierarchy here. A massive ballroom event isn't inherently better or more valid than a backyard ceremony run off a shared Google Sheet.
Right.
What matters is honestly matching your logistics to your mental bandwidth. So let's look at the deep end first, which is the full service planner.
And those are the professionals who basically project manage your life for a year, correct?
They are, yeah. A full service planner is with you from the engagement all the way to the honeymoon send-offs. They mitigate decision fatigue from day one. They manage over budget, they negotiate vendor contracts, and they design the entire cohesive aesthetic vision. Yeah. If you are working an 80-hour-week demanding day job, or if you absolutely hate logistics, or maybe you're planning a really complex destination wedding across time zones, a full planner is an incredible asset. They usually start working with you 6 to 12 months out.
But if a couple has, say, already picked their venue, they found their photographer, and they've designed the look themselves, bringing in a full planner at that stage seems like, a massive misallocation of funds.
It totally would be. That is where a partial or month of planner steps in, and that's usually 4 to 8 weeks prior to the wedding. You've already done the creative heavy lifting. You did the vendor selection.
Right. You made all the big choices.
Exactly. So the month of planner takes over the communication. They finalize the minute-by-minute timeline, and they build the logistics flow based on the choices you made. It's a fantastic bridge for couples who are organized but just need a professional to bring all those sprawling pieces across the finish line.
Which brings us to the tier I hear debated the absolute most in DIY circles, which is the day of coordinator, or DOC. This term is everywhere, but the definition seems to, constantly shift depending on who you talk to.
The shifting definition is exactly why we recommend this specific role so heavily for couples trying to balance their budget with their sanity. A day of coordinator is not a planner. You plan the wedding.
Yeah.
You source the decor. You handle the guest list.
So you're still doing the work up front.
Right. A DOC simply shows up to execute the blueprint you built. They manage the physical setup, they confirm the vendors, they troubleshoot the inevitable problems, and they run the actual day. They are basically the engine that powers your plan.
Okay, and if a couple says, I have a tiny budget, I'm bypassing all of that professional help and just using my spreadsheet, how does that hold up? Because I actually think about the DIY spreadsheet approach like driving a car with a manual transmission.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right, because if you are on an open, quiet country road on a Sunday afternoon, which represents your small, simple wedding, driving a stick shift is fine. It's actually enjoyable. You have total control over the gears. You're just cruising along.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. It works when things are calm.
But the second you hit dead-stopped gridlock traffic on a steep hill, meaning you have 30 different vendors, a massive wedding party, and a complex timeline that manual transmission completely stalls out. You are grinding the gears, you are sweating, and you desperately wish you had an automatic transmission shifting for you.
Yeah, nobody wants to be grinding the gears while trying to recite their vows. That sounds like a nightmare. Spreadsheets collapse under the weight of compounding complexity, like when the florist's arrival overlaps with the caterer's load-in, and the photographer needs to pull you for sunset portraits all at the exact same time. A piece of paper cannot make dynamic real-time decisions.
It's just a piece of paper.
Exactly. You need a human being to prioritize those overlapping crises.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though, regarding that compounding complexity. Because I hear couples say all the time, we don't need to hire a day of coordinator. The venue explicitly told us they provide one.
Oh, boy.
Right. From a couple's perspective, if I'm paying a venue $15,000 for a Saturday night, I naturally assume part of that massive fee guarantees they want my event to go perfectly. Don't they have a vested interest in coordinating my timeline?
This is the venue coordinator myth, and it's a massive trap built on a fundamental misunderstanding of liability boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes, the venue wants your event to be safe and beautiful, but the venue coordinator works for the property. Their fiduciary duty is to the building, not to you.
So their focus is entirely on structural preservation, basically, enforcing the parameters of the contract.
Absolutely. And listen, venue coordinators are often wonderful, highly competent people doing a very tough job. But their loyalty is to the real estate. Their job is making sure the catering staff doesn't damage the historic hardwood floors. They ensure the room is flipped by 5 o'clock sharp. They enforce local noise ordinances.
They're the building's bodyguard.
Yes, they are not your personal advocate. They will not chase down your florist if they are stuck in traffic. They are not going to completely rearrange your ceremony schedule because family portraits ran 20 minutes over.
Because rearranging your portraits has, zero impact on the building's liability.
Exactly. They are protecting the asset. I can illustrate this with a very specific scenario from a wedding we officiated a few years back. The couple decided to skip hiring a day of coordinator because they assumed the venue site manager was running the show.
Classic mistake.
It really was. So when we arrived, the venue coordinator was doing her job flawlessly. She was in the back hallway, managing the catering load-in and making sure the kitchen was up to fire code for dinner service.
Okay, but meanwhile, what was happening out front with the couple?
It was a cascading failure. The photographer was waiting at the wrong location for a first look that wasn't happening. The wedding party was just wandering aimlessly around the gardens because nobody was directing them to the staging area. The couple ended up falling 35 minutes behind schedule before anyone with actual authority over the full day stepped in to wrangle everyone.
Wow, 45 minutes is an eternity in event time. I mean, that eats your cocktail hour, it rushes your photos, and it forces your guests to just sit there and wait.
It ripples through the entire event logistics flow. The caterer is now holding hot food for an extra 45 minutes, which compromises the quality of a meal you paid thousands of dollars for. And the saddest part is, a dedicated day of coordinator would have caught that disconnect by 9 o'clock in the morning.
So the actionable takeaway here seems incredibly clear. Interrogate the contract. When a venue says they provide a coordinator, couples need to get a granular written list of that person's exact duties. Do not leave it to assumption.
You must get it in writing. Look at that list, recognize the liability boundaries, and then honestly assess if you need an advocate whose sole job is to protect your timeline.
So if the venue coordinator is guarding the property, the day of coordinator is guarding the couple. But what does that actually look like in practice? Because no timeline survives contact with a broken sound system or a delayed shuttle bus. What happens when the plan actually breaks?
That brings us to the core value of a DOC, which is problem absorption. They act as the buffer between you and disaster. Let's say your second cousin shows up without an RSVP and needs a seat and a meal, or the DJ's laptop randomly crashes right before the first dance.
Which happens.
It happens all the time. A DOC absorbs that panic, they stall the crowd, they negotiate with the kitchen for an extra plate, and they find a solution so your cortisol levels never spike.
They act as a firewall against stress. It's like having a single point of contact for every crisis.
A highly effective firewall. There was a beautiful summer wedding we worked, where the venue staff had set up the cake table perfectly, according to the exact floor plan the couple provided. But the floor plan didn't account for the movement of the sun.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this expensive, elaborate buttercream cake was sitting in direct, blazing sunlight.
That is a ticking time bomb for a complete structural collapse. You're going to have a melted cake.
It was a disaster waiting to happen. But the day of coordinator, who was constantly scanning the environment rather than just looking at a piece of paper, spotted it 2 hours before anyone else even thought to check. She quietly pulled a few staff members, relocated the heavy table into a shaded alcove, and meticulously redesigned the surrounding florals so the new location looked entirely intentional. She totally saved it from melting into a puddle.
Did the couple panic when they walked in and saw the room completely rearranged?
They had zero idea it was ever in danger. The DOC told them the story later that night after they had cut the cake, and everyone just laughed. But that is the magic of problem absorption. Beyond that, they enforce the timeline.
Right.
Like, if the best man's toast runs 12 minutes instead of 3, they are instantly in the kitchen adjusting the plating schedule so the food doesn't go cold. They answer the 50 tiny logistical questions from vendors loading in, so nobody is handing you a phone to talk to the caterer while you are trying to get your hair done.
It sounds like they are acting as the central processing unit for the entire day, which makes a ton of sense, but it also sounds like an added expense for someone already stretching their budget. So are there scenarios where a couple can legitimately bypass this and just rely on their community? Like, can you just hand the clipboard to a hyper-organized friend?
You absolutely can, but under very strict conditions. The first exception is the micro-wedding. If you have a truly small event, maybe 20 guests, a single location for both the ceremony and the reception, one caterer, and no complex room transitions, a professional DOC is likely overkill.
Because an event that size operates more like an intimate dinner party.
Exactly. It's manageable.
But if it is a larger event with moving parts, relying on a friend feels incredibly risky. I mean, you are essentially asking a guest to take on an unpaid, high-stress job.
It changes the entire dynamic of their day. If you use a friend, they must have ironclad boundaries. They have to be completely comfortable being the bad guy. They need to be willing to direct grown adults, hush chatty relatives during transitions, and most importantly, they need to be able to look you in the eye and say no if you are taking too long for photos and holding up the timeline.
That's a tough ask for a friend. Plus, there is the social cost. If your friend is running the timeline and putting out fires, they aren't drinking champagne and dancing. They are working.
Yeah, and if they are so stressed by coordinating that they miss the reception, you haven't done them a favor, and they won't remember your wedding fondly. The other rare exception is if your vendor team is exceptionally experienced and has worked together at that specific venue dozens of times.
So they just kind of know the drill?
Right. They might have a natural rhythm, but you cannot assume this unless they explicitly confirm they self-coordinate. It is very much the exception, not the rule.
Even in those relaxed 20-guest scenarios, just winging it seems dangerous. There still needs to be some definitive point of contact, doesn't there?
Always. Even for the most laid-back event, you must employ what we call the captain rule. The couple must designate one person to be the timeline keeper. This person cannot be in the wedding party. They cannot be a parent of the couple because the parents need to be emotionally present, and they absolutely cannot be the couple themselves.
Vendors need a definitive person to approach with quick questions so they aren't bothering the people actually getting married.
Yes.
So let's assume our listener realizes they don't fit those exceptions. They have 50 guests, they have 6 different vendors, and they recognize they genuinely need a DOC. The next major pitfall I see is a logistical one regarding timing. Because the title Day of Coordinator kind of implies you can just hire them for the day. Why can't I just hand my perfectly organized spreadsheet to a professional on a Friday night for a Saturday wedding?
Because that is a recipe for catastrophic failure. You must secure a DOC 4 to 6 weeks out, at an absolute minimum. Never the morning of the wedding. They need that runway to fact-check your work and hunt for the blind spots you didn't even know existed.
I look at that like handing a stage actor a really complex script they have never seen while physically shoving them out from behind the curtain onto a Broadway stage in front of a live audience.
That's exactly what it is.
I mean, the florist is already standing there asking where the electrical outlets are, the caterer is confused about the load-in dock, and your coordinator is frantically flipping through pages just trying to learn your last name. It is completely unfair to them, and it guarantees a stressful morning for you.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. A DOC needs weeks to review every single vendor contract for discrepancies. They need to build their own minute-by-minute timeline based on professional experience, not just optimistic guessing. They have to walk the venue, understand the spatial limitations, and conduct confirmation calls with every single vendor so everyone is aligned on the logistics flow.
So they are essentially stress testing the plan before the event actually happens.
They are stress testing everything. They also need a sit-down meeting with you to establish decision-making authority. Like if dark clouds roll in at 3 o'clock, who makes the ultimate call to move the ceremony indoors? They need that established weeks before the first drop of rain falls.
You don't want to be making that decision while you're getting dressed.
No, you really don't. The couples who tell us their coordinator saved their wedding almost always hired them well in advance. Those who waited till the week of the wedding usually spent their morning fielding frantic phone calls because the coordinator was still playing catch-up. Good DOCs book up fast, especially during peak wedding season. You want them on your team early.
So, synthesizing everything we have covered, from the cognitive load of the sports spectrum to the reality of what venue staff actually do, how do we turn this into concrete execution? What should the listener do next?
It boils down to a few core actions. First, interrogate the venue contract. Pin down the venue coordinator's exact duties and limitations in writing. Do not rely on assumptions.
That makes the second step an internal audit, then.
Yes, evaluate your own mental bandwidth honestly, without guilt. If your event has massive compounding complexity, allow yourself to get the structural support you need, whether that's a full planner or a DOC. And finally, if you do hire a day of coordinator, secure them at least 4 to 6 weeks in advance so they have the time to properly protect your plans.
Which brings us to the ultimate goal. You shouldn't be working the event you are hosting.
You really shouldn't. And as you weigh these options, consider the fascinating psychological element to this. Planning a wedding is fundamentally an administrative job. It requires research, negotiation, and endless decisions. But executing a wedding, directing the flow of 100 people and managing real-time logistics is a completely different physical and mental state.
Right.
When you are acting as the manager of your own wedding, constantly scanning the room for problems or checking your watch, your brain is in a state of hypervigilance. You are processing logistics, which means your brain isn't actually encoding episodic memories.
Wait, so by holding onto the clipboard and trying to maintain control, you are literally preventing your brain from remembering the joy of the day.
Yes. The cognitive load of managing the event blocks your ability to be emotionally present. Your brain can either solve logistical puzzles, or it can soak in the emotion of your vows and your community. But it struggles to do both simultaneously.
That is wild.
Giving up that clipboard to someone else isn't just about convenience. It is the only way your brain can actually absorb the feeling of getting married.
That is incredibly powerful. The best investment you can make might just be the ability to actually remember your own wedding clearly. We hope this deep dive gave you the clarity to build a solid framework for your day. We are wishing you a beautiful, deeply joyful, and utterly stress-free wedding. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to Planning Your I Do from You Had Me at I Do. Show notes, planning help, and ceremony support are at youhadmeatido.com/podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and send it to a bride friend who needs answers instead of more stress at 2 in the morning. Thanks for listening.